Hi, it's Katrina. St. Patrick's Purgatory. St. Patrick's Purgatory can be found in County Donegal, Ireland, on a small island in the middle of a lake known as Lough Derg. While this isn't actually purgatory, it is instead a monastery that was built over what the locals once believed to be a gateway to hell. So, close enough. As you can imagine, it's an unusual place. According to legend, Jesus showed St. Patrick a cave on this tiny island. When St. Patrick looked into the darkness, he had a sudden and terrible vision of the punishments of hell. St. Patrick then continued to use the cave as proof of what would happen to the local people if they didn't obey the laws of God. Anyone who looked in the cave was able to see the kinds of torments and miseries that were happening in the dark part of the afterlife. It was basically a really, really powerful scare tactic. But of course, this is just a story. We don't know if St. Patrick was really here, or if he really did see a vision of horrible cruelty when looking into the mouth of the mysterious cave. What we know for sure is that the monastery on the island is still standing. At least part of it is. The structure was built sometime before the 15th century, with nothing left of it today except its foundation and some bare stones from its walls. Bimkund. There is a mysterious pool in India that seems to be bottomless. It's called Bimkund, and no scientist has ever been able to figure out how deep it is. The pool is located near Bajna village and is a natural water tank that gets its source from deep within a cave. There's a small temple-like structure built beside it for easy access so that visitors can bathe in its supposedly holy waters. Going down to the pools is an adventure in itself. You have to climb an ancient stairway down into an underground cavern in order to finally reach the pool far below. But we don't actually know much about this mysterious pool. Scientists allegedly probed Bimkund, trying to figure out its depth, but never managed to get any correct readings. They put their instruments down over 600 feet, but the water just kept going. It could very well be the deepest natural pool anywhere on the planet, but no one knows for certain because we've never gotten definitive measurements. This is what the locals say anyway, who are probably quite happy to keep the pool bottomless and the mystery alive. The truth is that the pool can almost definitely be measured if a professional geologist took enough time to do it, but then that would ruin the mystique of the place. The Phrygian Valley. The Phrygian Valley was once the heartland of the Great Phrygian Kingdom. These ancient people occupied most of Turkey, rising to power after the Hittite Empire collapsed around the year 1200 BC. By 700 BC, the Phrygia had become the dominant culture in the region. We know they were likely allies with the Trojans during the epic Trojan War. The famous King Midas, the one who turned all he touched to gold, was the king of Phrygia. Even Alexander the Great ventured to Phrygia during his travels as he tried to become the king of the world. The point is that there's a lot of history in the region. The Phrygian Valley is enormous, stretching hundreds of miles and boasting some of the most unbelievable archaeological sites in the world. For example, Gordion is here, the ancient Phrygian capital that reached its peak around 600 BC. This is where the tomb of great King Midas can be found. Then there's Yazilikaya, or more commonly known as the Midas Monument. It's a massive tomb facade that isn't really a tomb. Someone simply carved a giant tomb face into a rock, probably during the 7th century BC. Then at the bottom, where the entrance to the tomb should have been, was only a small niche for a statue of the goddess Cybele. That statue is gone now, and the whole place is in ruins. The truly magical part about the Phrygian Valley is the sheer scope of archaeological wonder. You can't go far in any direction without stumbling upon some ancient monument, hidden tomb, or lost city. Why do you think the Midas Monument was built to look like a tomb facade? I'd like to read your theories in the comments. The Great Gate of Madagascar. The Ambohimanga main gate is probably an archaeological marvel you've never heard of before. That's because it comes from a town built in the 18th century in rural Madagascar, which isn't exactly an archaeological hotspot. The town of Ambohimanga was naturally shielded by forests, but this wasn't enough to keep them from being attacked. They had to erect a large wall surrounding the city to keep the royal family safe. So the royal family took safety to a level never before seen on this island nation. A huge wall was thrown up along with 7 outer gates to protect those within. The main gate wasn't so much a door as it was an enormous stone disc. It was like something you would expect to see in a movie blocking the entrance to a magical tomb. The door of the gate was a standing stone weighing 12 tons. It was so ridiculously big that the only way to move it was with 20 strong people pushing it aside. The piece of stone was over 130 feet in circumference. Every night, guards would roll the stone into its position, completely blocking all traffic in and out of the town. It was a pretty clever idea, and it worked for the people of the city. These days, the stone is stuck in place, tucked beside the main entranceway, no longer used. But it is still there, as is the walled city of the Marina Kingdom, who ruled over this region 300 years ago. There are royal burial grounds inside the city, pavilions, and even more standing stones. Mont Saint-Michel. Mont Saint-Michel is arguably the most amazing and most picturesque place in all of France. It also looks like something straight out of a Disney movie. Mont Saint-Michel is the name of an island capped by an abbey that seems to defy gravity. Mont Saint-Michel can trace its origin back to the early 8th century. In the nearby town of Avranches, a bishop by the name of Albert had a vision. He claimed to have been visited by the archangel Michael, who pressured him into building a church on top of an island just out to sea. This island would become the foundation for the abbey in the middle of a bay between Normandy and Brittany. Because of its beautiful location, Mont Saint-Michel has been capturing people's imaginations for centuries. From the year 966 on, the Dukes of Normandy all supported the development of a massive Benedictine abbey on top of this small island. After the Dukes of Normandy, the French kings continued to support the development with whatever funds and political muscle was needed. The place became a major center for learning, with some of the brightest minds in Europe flocking to the abbey to study and write manuscripts. It's amazing because the abbey still stands today. There are massive walls around the island originally designed to keep the English out. Today, they are all historical buildings. There's even a small village tucked onto the lower tiers of the island where people used to live. Have you ever visited Mont Saint-Michel, or do you want to? If so, let me know about your experience in the comments. Big shout out to Molly Perkins and Trey Issues 13. Thanks so much for supporting this channel. If you are new here, welcome, and be sure to hit that subscribe button for more videos like these. The Caves of Ventanillas de Otusco. The archaeological site of Ventanillas de Otusco in Peru is as unique as it gets. The place is located over 6,000 feet above sea level, a series of artificial caves that were used around 2,000 years ago for burying the dead. The Cajamarca culture of this region carved narrow holes into the cliffside here, reminiscent of body storage drawers you see in morgues. They then stored their dead inside the carved holes, one to each cubby. This created a massive open-air necropolis with hundreds of deceased looking down into the valleys below. When archaeologists started excavating the necropolis, they were confused about one major thing. They never found any complete skeletons inside the cubbyholes. This indicated the caves were used as secondary burial locations. What this means is that when the Cajamarca buried someone, the corpse was put in the ground. Then, after some decomposition had happened, their skull and a handful of their bones were taken out of the ground. These were transported to the caves and stored inside one of the niches. What's strange is that archaeologists have no idea why. They think it has something to do with a death cult, but don't have much of a better explanation than that. It's a total mystery. Grimes Point. Grimes Point prehistoric rock site is located just outside the town of Fallon in Nevada. You wouldn't even know you were walking through an archaeological zone if not for the signs pointing out the rocks covered in mysterious petroglyphs. It was here that Native Americans left their mark over 8,000 years ago. Not only did the natives leave behind some very curious petroglyphs carved onto the red rocks of the desert, they also left behind some artifacts. Archaeologists studying the site have found pieces of bone and shell and even primitive tools. But for all the research that has been done here, nobody has managed to decipher the meaning of the petroglyphs. Some say the drawings are the constellations in the night sky. Some say it's just a bunch of nonsense scribbled on the boulders. The one thing that's for sure is that when you visit Grimes Point and see the petroglyphs for yourself, your imagination can run wild. Underground pyramid in Bolivia. At the ancient fortress of Tiwanaku in western Bolivia, archaeologists discovered an underground pyramid. The archaeologists are with the Tiwanaku Archaeological Research Center. They used ground-penetrating radar to identify anomalies underneath the ancient capital of the most important civilization in South America prior to the Inca. These anomalies appear to be mostly monoliths, But there is also one giant anomaly that looks an awful lot like a pyramid. In other words, there are multiple structures, perhaps an entire lost piece of the city, hiding underneath the ground. Researchers say it will take another 5 years for them to properly excavate the area and see what's actually under their feet. Now, what's even more interesting is that we don't really know who lived in Tiwanaku. Scientists simply call them the Tiwanaku culture. We know that they have close ties to the Wari people and may have even influenced the Inca who came to power in the north. The people of Tiwanaku flourished from around the year 300 to 1000 AD, with the city becoming one of the biggest and most powerful in all of ancient America. The nearby Lake Titicaca was considered to be the center of the earth, the very place where humans first appeared on the planet. It was Lord Viracocha, the creator of all things, who chose Tiwanaku to be the capital of civilization, according to myth. But alas, this great city only lasted 700 years before being abandoned and left to ruin. How in the world they could have buried a pyramid underneath it is a mystery. Mammoth Cave. Mammoth Cave is one of the most mysterious places not only in Kentucky, but in all of the United States. It is an ancient underground labyrinth with a depth that nobody has ever been able to measure. The surface of Mammoth Cave National Park is about 80 square miles, but underneath, going deep into the subterranean world hidden below, the area remains shrouded in mystery. There are at least 400 miles of passages and dark caverns that have never been seen by human eyes. That's on top of the 365 miles that have already been mapped. Even today, new caverns are continuously being discovered. As you might have guessed, this is the longest known cave system in the world, according to National Geographic. It's dangerous, dark, and people may have lived in it as far back as 5,000 years. Archaeologists have found proof of mineral mining dating back 3,000 years, in the way of ancient mining tools left on the passage floors. But we don't actually know how important this place was to the Native Americans. It's so deep and so confusing and so hard to actually excavate that nobody knows if humans lived in it or even created subterranean cities deep below the ground. Have you ever been here? Let me know your experience in the comments. Dosto Dragon. Dosto Dragon is a natural protrusion sticking out in the Indian Ocean that looks like a sleeping dragon. It's located on the northern tip of Grange Tomb Island, off the coast of East Africa, formed over millions of years. For as long as people have lived on the island, they've referred to the natural formation as the dragon's back. The ridge of the protrusion is covered in standing stones that give life to the dragon's spine, while mossy rocks make the beast look as if it has real shining scales. But of course, it's not a real dragon, at least not that anybody has been able to prove. If there really is a dragon underneath the mossy rocks, I think everyone on Earth would be extremely shocked. The island itself formed millions of years ago thanks to volcanic activity. One of the nearby volcanoes erupted in 2006. There isn't much in the way of archaeological sites here. It's really the dragon that's the main attraction. There is a walking path along the ridges of its spine, allowing visitors to take in the unbelievable scenery as they stroll along the back of the dragon. Amaterasus Cave. The Iwano-Iwato Shrine is a very real place, despite being straight out of Japanese mythology. It's located inside a larger area called Takachiho, which is somewhat similar in concept to the Japanese version of Mount Olympus. According to legend, it was the Shinto sun goddess Amaterasu who came to this place after her brother played a cruel prank on her. She was so upset by her brother that the goddess hid inside of a cave in Takachiho, thereby depriving the world of sunlight. The other gods and goddesses realized this was not ideal for the world, so they came to this place and gathered together to lure her out of the cave. But Amaterasu was still too upset to leave, and so the world remained in darkness. It wasn't until one of the goddesses performed a dance to make the gods laugh that Amaterasu finally came out to see why everyone was having so much fun. See, the FOMO was real. Once out of the darkness of the cavern, the light was once more shining in the world. This is definitely just a mythical story, but the cave Amaterasu took shelter in is a real place. The Amano-Iwato Shrine was built just outside its entrance, a truly breathtaking piece of ancient Japanese architecture. You can look directly inside the cave to the dank alcove where the goddess had once hidden the sun. The Hill of Ishnach. The Hill of Ishnach was once considered to be the center of Irish mythology. It's located in the barony of Rathcaranth and currently has the status of being a protected monument. The hill consists of megalithic tombs, several burial mounds, the ruins of stone walls, holy wells, and even an ancient road from medieval times. It's also quite close to the geographical center of Ireland, which may explain why it was the sacred core of the island for thousands of years. In Irish mythology, the Hill of Ishnach is supposed to be the burial place for several different Irish gods, including the Dag Damór. He was the king god, ruler and protector of the Irish Celts. The Irish believed he came from a giant race of people called the Tuatha De Danann, probably not saying that right, but they were the most important ruling clan of gods in Ireland. There are plenty of myths about the Dag Damór. He was a warrior, a father figure, fought the forces of evil, and his bones are under the Hill of Ishnach. There are other strange mythological stories surrounding this hill as well. It's said to be a meeting place between the earthly realm and that of the other world. There was supposedly a sacred fire that blazed on its peak for 7 years, and once, long ago, there was a great hailstorm over the hill, which created the 12 great rivers of Ireland. No matter where you look in Irish mythology, the Hill of Ishnach is going to be mentioned somewhere, and this incredible mythological location is one you can actually visit today in the real world. Sodom and Gomorrah. When archaeologists were looking through the ruins of a town from the Bronze Age called Tal el-Hammam, they discovered something unbelievable. The town had been destroyed in the year 1650 BC. At that time, this was one of the 3 biggest cities in the region, even larger than Jerusalem. It had mud brick buildings over 5 stories tall, temples, places of learning. It was a true metropolis. But what archaeologists were stumped about was the fact that it seemed to have been completely melted by fire in a single day. It didn't look like the destruction seen through warfare, but by some kind of cataclysmic event. It's now believed Tal el-Hammam was destroyed by a fireball from the sky. An exploding space rock fell upon the city with the force of 1,000 atomic bombs, likely inspiring the mythical story of Sodom and Gomorrah. The city of Sodom and Gomorrah is mentioned in the book of Genesis as a place of great sin. The people in the city were so sinful and hedonistic that God rained upon them brimstone and fire. The Bible literally describes fire and sulfur coming from heaven and destroying the city in a great blazing inferno. And scientists can confirm that this really did happen. According to Christopher R. Moore, archaeologist at the University of South Carolina, it was an airburst from a meteor that destroyed Tal el-Hammam, aka Sodom and Gomorrah. It likely exploded about 2.5 miles above the tops of the buildings, creating a blast force 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The air temperature rose to 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit. People's clothing burst into flames. Wood was scorched and turned to ash. Swords and pottery melted. Then a shock wave ripped through the city at over 740 miles per hour, reducing every man-made structure to a pile of rubble. The ancient people who learned what happened here were so shocked, the only way they could make sense of the devastation was by attributing it to an angry act of God. The Killing Stone. The Seshoseki is a stone from ancient Japanese mythology. It's also known as the Killing Stone. Legend has it that anyone who touches the stone will die immediately. The reason for the deadly quality of the stone? According to mythology, the boulder supposedly held an evil spirit. The spirit is that of a 9-tailed fox who transformed itself into a beautiful woman named Tamamo no Mei with the intention of killing Emperor Toba. However, the wily fox was no match for the emperor and was defeated. Upon its defeat, the evil fox was put into the stone and dropped on a volcanic mountain. And there the stone has stayed for centuries. It was even registered as a historical site in 1957. But in 2022, something unthinkable happened. Visitors to the popular site were stupefied to see that the Killing Stone had split in half. Yes, the legendary stone containing the spirit of the 9-tailed fox broke apart, releasing the evil spirit back into the world. For those who really believe in Japanese mythology, this was not a good day. There are some who still think the old tales are real. These people are currently under the impression an evil spirit has been released from its prison and is about to start causing serious problems. On the other hand, the cracked stone was probably a natural occurrence caused by cold weather. Rain and freezing temperature caused the stone to crack, not an angry spirit. At least, that's the hope. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The Hanging Gardens. Out of all the ancient wonders of the world, there is only one that's never technically been found. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon have reached a mythical status in history because no one, historians, archaeologists, researchers, and scientists alike, can figure out if the place ever really existed. The Hanging Gardens were described as a remarkable feat of engineering, a series of tiered gardens with trees, shrubs, and all the wild plant life you could imagine. The gardens were supposedly constructed alongside a grand palace by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II. This was around 2,500 years ago. The biggest issue is that nobody has found archaeological proof of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. There are also no ancient Babylonian texts that so much as mention the gardens. Either this place was mythical, or there was some other garden that was greatly exaggerated by Greek and Roman writers. The third and final option is that the Hanging Gardens were built somewhere else altogether, and not in Babylon. Sherwood Forest. When somebody says Sherwood Forest, the first thing that pops into your head is probably the famous outlaw Robin Hood. But what you may not know is that Sherwood Forest is a very real place in England. The existence of Robin Hood is highly debatable, but there is no arguing Sherwood Forest is a real and very magical place. So who was Robin Hood? The truth is that Robin Hood was a common nickname given to any petty criminal starting around the 13th century. There were probably men just like Robin Hood who lived in the forest, hiding from the king and his court. They were definitely criminals, and the peasants probably did look up to them. But nobody thinks there was one real Robin Hood. Instead, the name first appears in a poem in 1377, then gets blown out of proportion in 1521 by Scottish historian John Mayer. From then on, Robin Hood was the medieval Batman. As for Sherwood Forest, its history goes back to the days of prehistoric hunters. Flint tools have been found belonging to Stone Age people. Farmers cropped up in the Iron Age, and the Romans crept into the forest in the early part of the Common Era. It was once the biggest forest in England, with 100,000 acres in the 1200s. This was during the rumors of Robin Hood, when real thieves lived in the woods and attacked travelers. Sadly, the forest has been picked apart and turned into farmland, and now most of it is gone. Hades. We may not have any proof that the legendary underworld from Greek mythology is a real place, but we do know where there is one supposed entrance. I am, of course, talking about Hades, the place people in the ancient Greek world believed they went when they died. Many people believed Hades was accessible through certain caves and tunnels going into the earth. Because they believed the underworld was literally under their feet, it only made sense that you could journey there by finding the right cave. One of these supposed entrances is at Cape Matapan. It's here where several stories from Greek mythology took place. It's where Orpheus entered the underworld to look for his lost love. It's where Hercules went down into the gloom to find Cerberus, Hades' three-headed dog. Even the Spartans saw how important this place was and built temples and altars all over the rocky headland. There is also a temple here built by the Spartans that still stands, one dedicated to the sea god Poseidon. Today, we know the caves at Cape Matapan don't lead to a terrible underground land of the dead, but they are still there. They've mostly been flooded by now and can only be visited by boat. The New Grange Tomb. The New Grange Tomb in Ireland is certainly one of the more mysterious places in the country. The tomb dates back 5,200 years to the Neolithic period. It's also just one part of a much larger historic site called Brunabonye. Together, there are three major tombs spread across the area: Knowth, Dowth, and Newgrange. There is no denying the New Grange Tomb is a magical place. The rocks are carved in strange Celtic designs with spirals. There are over 97 large stones covered in these designs, used as the building blocks of the megalithic tomb. Archaeologists believe whoever made the designs didn't actually build the structure. The Celts didn't arrive in Ireland for thousands of years after the tomb was completed, so the strange spirals and other artwork probably came later. We don't know exactly what ancient myths the New Grange Tomb was connected to. We do know that it was built to perfectly line up with the sun during the winter solstice. The sun beams through a box on the roof, right above the entrance to the main passage. On the winter solstice, the sun illuminates the main chamber and turns it into a blinding box of pure gold for about 15 minutes. All these thousands of years later, people still travel to the tomb every year just to experience it. The Fountain of Youth. The myth of the Fountain of Youth has been around for a very long time in just about every culture. There are dozens of legends from Japan to Polynesia about a special source of water with either unbelievable healing properties or the ability to make you immortal. But here's a place from myth that really does exist. The story goes back to the Spanish conquistador Juan Ponce de León. He heard rumors of a magical fountain in a rejuvenating river north of Cuba. This was around the second voyage of Christopher Columbus to the New World in 1493. But it wasn't until after his death that the stories of him and the Fountain of Youth began being told throughout the empire. In 1535, there was a rumor that Ponce de León was seeking the fountain to cure his impotence. There are no historical records that show Ponce de León ever discovering the Fountain of Youth. There aren't even any records of him arriving in St. Augustine, Florida. Most historians think he landed about 60 miles south and missed it altogether. Nonetheless, the St. Augustine Fountain of Youth is a very real place. There is a natural spring here that people still believe magically gives them a youthful appearance. Rumor says that Ponce de León was the first European to drink from the spring. It's probably not true, but either way, it's been a source of alleged healing for Europeans and their descendants for 500 years. The Gates of Guinea. If you've ever wondered where the mythical gate to the voodoo underworld is, you're in for a treat. Legend has it that there are 7 gates throughout the New Orleans French Quarter, all leading to the land of the dead, known as Guinea. In voodoo teachings, the souls of the dead reside in this dark underworld. It's not a place of misery and torture, but more like a murky plane of purgatory. Spirits must wade through this purgatory before they are eventually reunited with their ancestors. The voodoo underworld is ruled by Baron Samedi, a skeleton in a top hat. For voodoo practitioners in America, these gates are in New Orleans, scattered at various points along Canal Street in cemeteries. One of them is supposedly hidden within the St. Louis Cemetery, another in the Greenwood Cemetery, one in the Cypress Grove Cemetery, and another in the St. Patrick Cemetery. Have you ever been to New Orleans? Did you see these gates? Let me know in the comments below. Ming Dynasty Tombs. The Ming Dynasty tombs are a collection of mausoleums built by the emperors of the Ming Dynasty. One of these is located in the old capital of Nanjing. There are 12 more belonging to other emperors, and these are all grouped around Beijing. As a group, they are known as the 13 Tombs of the Ming Dynasty. In 1420, the Yongle Emperor chose the area on the slope of the Tianshu Mountain to have a great mausoleum built for himself. The emperors that came after followed his lead and placed their tombs in the same valley. The very first ruler of the Ming was the Hongwu Emperor, buried in Nanjing, which was the original capital city. The second ruler was the Jianwen Emperor, and he was overthrown by the Yongle. The second emperor's gravesite remains lost to history. It was the Yongle Emperor whose burial site selection, based on feng shui, inspired the remaining emperors to construct their mausoleums. See, he had a good idea. They were off limits to commoners, but this didn't stop them from being ransacked and burned in 1644, when the army of Li Xicheng captured Beijing. The tombs of the royal emperors are quite extravagant, but recently archaeologists found some smaller graves also from the Ming Dynasty that were less spectacular. They were found in Nanling County by a group of villagers. The identities of the people buried here are unknown, but it shows that people aside from emperors managed to make mausoleums for themselves during this period. And why not? Would you like to have your own mausoleum? Let me know in the comments below. Statue in the mud. In the Egyptian city of Cairo, a truly enormous statue was pulled from the mud. A team of Egyptian and German researchers found the statue in a slum on the outskirts of the city, literally buried under soggy soil. The statue is about 26 feet tall and made of pure quartzite. The face of the giant stone monument suggests it was supposed to depict Ramses II. This was a rare and unique discovery, but not surprising when you know the location. What is today a slum was once part of the great city of Heliopolis, one of the oldest in all of ancient Egypt. It was here, thousands of years ago, that a cult came together in worship of the sun. Heliopolis grew to be the main city for all Egyptian religious activity for at least 1,000 years. Today, there is nothing but old buildings and a rapidly rising water table, leading to the muck and muddy conditions where this statue was found. As for the great pharaoh depicted on the statue, he was also known as Ramses the Great. He ruled Egypt during the 19th dynasty between 1279 to 1213 BC. What archaeologists pulled from the mud was the upper part of the statue and the head. It's in fragments and had to be picked up by a forklift out of the muck. You just never know where ancient history lay hiding, maybe even in your own backyard. The oldest mummies. New research has suggested that a set of human skeletons found in Portugal could be the oldest mummies in the entire world. Experts have reconstructed what they believe happened to these individuals 8,000 years ago when they died in Portugal's Sodom Valley. Their conclusion is that the ancient people who lived here naturally removed moisture from the bodies, resulting in mummification. The discovery actually goes back to the 1960s, when 13 bodies were first exhumed from the valley. Each one had been buried with their knees bent against their chest, hunched over themselves in a kind of fetal position. Researchers believe the bodies gradually became desiccated or lost all moisture along with help from other people. They had ropes binding them in place, squeezing their legs against their chest. As their corpses dried out and the moisture seeped out of them, the ropes were tightened, and the dead person was compressed into an even tighter position. They were making tightly packed mummies. It's what some researchers have termed guided mummification. The dead were guided into a particular state to keep them preserved in their hole in the ground. What's truly mysterious is that nobody knows why the people of the Sado Valley practice such a specific type of mummification. They've guessed it could have been to transport bodies more easily into their graves. However, that's just a theory. We know this process would have taken a lot of time. We also know that none of the mummy's skin decayed after they were put in the ground. They definitely did this on purpose, but we don't have a clue as to why. It's pretty astounding to think this was all happening 8,000 years ago. That's even before the Chinchorro mummies of Chile, previously believed to be the oldest mummies in the world at 7,000 years old. 9,000-year-old beer. Speaking of old things, archaeologists working in the southeast of China have discovered microfossil residues left behind at a burial site. These residues have proved to be physical evidence of beer drinking from 9,000 years ago. The discovery is likely some of the oldest ritual alcohol consumption in the world. The discovery was made after archaeologists found ceramic vessels. These vessels contained starches, fungal remains, and plant residues that can all be traced back to alcohol. But why did these ancient people drink during funerals, besides the obvious grief? Researchers believe it was a way for them to honor the dead. Just as many cultures do today, they drank to the dead in ancient southern China. But the beer made back then was significantly different. It was made of rice and had a very low alcohol content. It was fermented, probably a little sweet, and would have been cloudy. Researchers believe alcohol was discovered totally by accident. When people realized that as grains were left to become moldy, they became sweeter and could produce mind-altering effects. Have you ever wondered how alcohol fermentation was discovered? This may be a clue. Magical incantation bowls. In 2003, after the war in Iraq began, thousands of stolen artifacts started showing up in international trade markets. These were illegally sold artifacts from thousands of years ago, belonging to ancient civilizations. Recently, some of these artifacts were acquired by Israeli authorities following a raid on a property notorious for illegal antiquities trading. Everyone in the neighborhood knew who these guys were. The raid revealed hundreds of relics, a stash of coins, items made from bone and ivory, and perhaps some of the most mysterious of all, magical incantation bowls. According to a member of the Israel Antiquities Authority's Robbery Prevention Unit, the bowls are fairly common in Iraq and have been found at plenty of dig sites. These ones date back 1,500 years and were used in incantations. Each bowl is covered in Hebrew text, and one even has a drawing of a great demon on it. These bowls were inscribed with a plea for protection against evil, filled with some kind of offering, and then buried underneath the floor of a house as a charm. Ancient people living in Jerusalem, along with plenty of parts of the Mediterranean, believed such magical bowls would protect them from disease, being cursed, and from malicious demons. Do you think these objects should be allowed to be bought and sold by private collectors? What would you do with an ancient incantation bowl if you had one? Tell me in the comments, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these. Revolutionary cannons. Archaeologists rescued a dozen Revolutionary War cannons from the Savannah River in January 2022. It was a remarkable find, though researchers aren't sure exactly which old vessel carried these cannons or how they ended up in the river. The cannons were discovered when the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers began deepening the channel in Savannah's busy harbor. They uncovered the cannons, then hauled them out of the water. The archaeologist involved with the project says there is no telling what else could be down there. Much of the Savannah River is unknown, filled with everything from ancient Native American pottery to debris from a Civil War ironclad vessel that sank back in 1864. The best guess historians have now is that the cannons came from the HMS Rose. This was a famous British warship that fought colonists during the Revolution 250 years ago. The ship was scuttled by the British to block the channel and prevent the French from coming to aid the colonists as they tried to retake the city. Anyone here been to Savannah? Let me know in the comments below. The Venus of Willendo. The Venus of Willendo is a small figurine that was discovered in 1908 at a site near the village of Willendorf in Austria. It was initially dated to be 30,000 years old, making it one of the oldest figurines ever discovered on the planet. For that reason, it's been a huge mystery for the last century since it was uncovered. Now, it looks like the origin of the figurine has finally been identified. Researchers with the University of Vienna used microcomputer tomography to analyze the figurine. Based on the data they collected, along with sediments found at the site of its initial discovery, they believe it was made in Italy, near Lake Garda. It's a remarkable revelation because it means the Venus figurine started its journey south of the Alps and made it all the way to the Danube River in the north, at a time before humans had ever built a city or a village. Based on all these facts, researchers are now guessing it was carved by a culture of early humans who had just started learning how to use complex tools. They were still hunter-gatherers, but were becoming more and more advanced by the year. The group must have had a migration route along a river, going through the Alps into what is now Austria. They could have been chasing animals or moving to avoid poor weather, taking the Venus of Willendo with them on their travels. It must have been an extremely important figure, perhaps depicting some sort of prehistoric deity. Roman emerald mines. At the archaeological site of Sikait, located far in Egypt's eastern desert, an international group of researchers came across an area that was once mined by the Romans. Inscriptions at these ancient mines indicate that the Roman army had seized the region and taken control of all the work being done. These mines must have been extremely important and very valuable, enough for the Romans to station a whole legion of soldiers there to keep them safe. The site of Sikait dates back to at least the 4th century AD, around the time Rome had taken over Egypt and right before their empire collapsed. The team also discovered a massive temple, as well as some ritual sanctuaries lying in ruin. But the really interesting part, aside from the mines, is an ancient structure the experts are calling the tripartite building. They believe this was a huge storage complex where Romans kept a dizzying number of emeralds stashed. The emeralds were taken out of the mines, stored in this enormous structure, and then protected day and night by soldiers. The Romans weren't the only people to control these incredible emerald mines. The entire area was mined and occupied by a nomadic group of desert dwellers known as the Blemmyes. It's also possible that the Blemmyes built and oversaw the mines before the fall of the empire. Ice Age Mammoth. At a construction site in the United Kingdom, archaeologists came across the remains of a prehistoric beast. It happened in the small city of Devon, with the creature being dated back 60,000 years. Archaeologists found some other pretty cool stuff too, such as mysterious artifacts left behind by an ancient civilization. But it's the mammoth bones that really caught everyone's attention. The researchers found one of the mammoth's tusks, some bones from its skull, and fragments of its skeleton. Even more, the archaeologists found ancient remains of a whole menagerie of animals. Ancient wolves, hyenas, foxes, deer, and even rhinoceroses. Yes, rhinoceroses once lived in the quiet countryside of Britain. It's likely these animals roamed the island during the last ice age, between 30,000 and 60,000 years ago. Another reason the discovery is so fascinating is that never before have so many Ice Age animals been found in a single spot in the UK. These samples of ancient bones have been overwhelming scientists. They are hoping that when they finally are able to catalog and analyze all of the remains, they'll have a clear picture of what life was like during the Ice Age in the United Kingdom. That's way before a single human ever stepped foot on the island. Sunken Roman boat. A Roman boat sank in the Mediterranean Sea 1,700 years ago. It was only recently, though, that it was revealed and led to the discovery of a wealth of archaeological treasures. The boat was found off the coast of one of the busiest beaches in Mallorca, Spain. It had been a merchant vessel that carried wine, olives, and fermented fish sauce from Spain to Italy. But for whatever reason, it sank, was buried under the waves, and slowly got covered by sand at the bottom of the seabed. Unlike most shipwrecks that are found in open water, this one was discovered just 6 feet beneath the surface of the waves, at the very edge of the beach. Countless tourists have been swimming over the wreckage of the ship for decades without knowing it. This has led researchers to suggest the boat had been docked in the Bay of Palma when it was destroyed. But finally, the shipwreck was identified and archaeologists moved in to investigate. They are now calling it the Caves of Ventanillas wreck and have recovered over 300 ancient jars full of trade goods from the 4th century. In addition to the jars with all kinds of ingredients, things like oil and garum, archaeologists also found everyday items. They uncovered a leather shoe, a cooking pot, and a carpenter's drill. All this stuff is quite impressive and paints a unique picture of life on a merchant ship in the days of the Roman Empire. Thanks for watching! What's your favorite discovery that we talked about today? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more awesome videos. See you later! Bye!